All right, well, we have everybody here. So, hey, welcome. This is the Getting to Know Lumos webinar. We are so happy to have you all here. This is the episode 6, and we have special guest speaker Mark Jewell. In case you didn't recognize his name, for those of you who don't know who he is a world-renowned, at least nationally renowned speaker, energy sales specialist that has helped um, to guide the Energy Star programs for buildings. If you guys haven't used Energy Star to benchmark buildings, I suggest you go out there and take a look at it and see if that matches with your current business model. But Mark helped to build that out at a time when the federal government was looking for ways to help energy efficiency across the U.S. And of course, we're going to start this off with what we normally start off with, which is my screen and our product line. So just to remind you, it's Lumos Controls. We're a Wasilica brand. We are stationed in Lake Forest, California, where Jonathan Yao, our friendly neighborhood applications engineer and jack of all trades, mans the location. Very near to Ann and John Morrell, who are our fantastic rep agency, ERI, out of California, and we want to welcome them. I see Ann and several of her people are on today. Thank you for joining us. Here is our lineup. We are a Bluetooth mesh network system. We are DLC approved, and we are a network lighting control system. We have some LLLC. For those of you who find that you need luminaire level lighting control, we do have some luminaire level lighting control products, including the AF10 and the Cyrus F, which is what you need in order to empower each fixture individually. Excuse me, to see and to interact with scheduling and daylight harvesting and the like. So we also have phase dimming, trailing edge, and typically we don't do a lot with forward phase dimming, although Jonathan tells me that the OmniTED is very capable of doing both. And then, of course, the Dolly controller is shown here, folks. I know Dolly is not really popular here in the US, but I can tell you this. One of the great advantages of using Lumos controls as compared to, say, some other ecosystems is that you can use 0 to 10 volt and Dolly dimming profiles in the same ecosystem without missing a beat. The Dolly controller will allow for special activities like emergency battery backup automation. So for legacy buildings where they still have buildings that have batteries in the light, rather than an inversion or an inverter system down in the basement, the great piece that we can provide is that we can automate the 30-second test once a month, the 90-minute test once a year, and we can build and maintain the reports through that automation and keep your building owners and your facility managers in compliance for local authority. So when the safety guys show up at the front door and they're demanding to see the proof that they've done the 30-second test and a 90-minute test, and that they've taken the recommended actions to remediate any issues that show up, you'll always have that information available. So that's one of the benefits of using our Dolly with the 0 to 10 volt dimming profiles. If you're a Dolly fan, well, then you know all about why that's a great product anyway. So then, of course, we go to our sensors. We have low voltage LLLC high base sensors. We have stick and go battery powered and self-powered motion sensor and daylight harvesting. We have a daylight switch, an occupancy sensor wall switch, and then, of course, the creme de la creme, what really makes us who we are, our dual function series, which includes the Cyrus AP, the Cyrus AM, and the Cyrus F. And the Cyrus F is not necessarily shown on this page, which should be. I am in error here, but the Cyrus F is our LLLC device, and then Cyrus AP and the Cyrus AM are zone sensors. So when we're building a value engineered lighting controls package, our dual function AP and AM, that means that they have both occupancy, vacancy, and daylight harvesting capabilities. And we work in closed loop and open loop systems or custom daylight harvesting techniques. So for those of you who joined us, I think was it the last one, Jonathan, where we went through daylight harvesting?
I cannot remember, but it was either the last one or the one before, so somewhat recently.
Great. Well, we had a great time talking about closed and open loop and why closed loop is better. But open loop is still used, and we can work in any condition. So that's our sensors. Great movement then next to our switches, which we have 4-button, 8-button, single button, dimming, kinetic switches. So low voltage is covered. We have a battery powered one. We can turn anybody's switch into a Lumos controls switch. So any legacy, rotary, any switch at all. If it pushes on and off and it dims, we can attach the K-Tron AI to the back of the gang box and turn it into a Lumos control switch. We have, of course, the Iris Edge, which is now our BMS connection to BACnet BMS systems. We no longer require a Jace controller. We can use just our Iris E. It is much faster. We can do more things. So if you're used to only seeing schedules on the BMS system, I can tell you this, folks. We can give you full access, full control over each fixture and each group and zone, much more than just your zone or scheduling interaction. We can do much more with just a single controller now, and that's our Iris E. Our Enor E has been upgraded recently to include astronomical clock functionality, so we can drop the intermatic. You can drop the intermatic astronomical clocks from your submittals and use the Enor E. And if it's an 8 circuit or 16 circuit astronomical clock, just add the appropriate number of 3 amp or 20 amp relays, and you have yourself an intermatic system without the expense. And then, of course, there's our BMS integration. Shows it without the Iris. It would just use the Iris E, no Jace 8000, like many of our competitors, and even us up to just the other day. Actually, it's not just the other day, but in our field, 6 months ago, is just the other day. And of course, we can connect to any BACnet or any other system, depending on what your end user's needs are. And then, of course, the Enor E with its new astronomical clock feature, it is unparalleled. And that brings us to a close. Now, don't forget to tune in to our next series after Mark. We're very excited to have Mark Jewell, but our next speaker will also be somebody equally as exciting. And it's Randy Lucas, and we'll be talking about something that's really made a lot of difference in the sales of large projects, and that's the 179D, or the Inflation Reduction Act, and how that can help to push through large projects for our customers that are not necessarily looking to spend money at the moment. This is a great way to help push those projects through and to get a yes where a no has been the norm. So I'm going to pull back my share, and well, just so you know, if you have questions or Jonathan, where do they put that, in the chat or the Q&A?
Either one. We'll see them.
Okay.
Yeah, just whichever one you want.
All right. Well, I want to now take a moment to introduce Mark Jewell, a friend of mine and a fantastic trainer, educator in the energy space. And here you go, Mark. Take it away.
Hey, terrific. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everybody, for being with me today and with us, joining us for this webinar. Let me just preface it by saying that nothing I tell you in the next 20, 30 minutes is going to be hypothetical. It's all based on the scar tissue I've had being in the industry for 30 years in the lighting business, in the energy efficiency space. Selling energy, it has trained over 15,000 energy professionals, about 70% of whom have hailed from the lighting space. A fun fact, which you'd never know unless I told you, is that my 12-year-old daughter's middle name is Lumen. I started my career in energy in the lighting energy efficiency business right after the Wharton School of Finance back in 1993. So last year was my 30th anniversary. So the scar tissue I'm going to share with you as to what works and what doesn't work in terms of selling energy efficiency projects and lighting is or any expense reducing capital project in the world is based on 30 years worth of experience and the combined experience and best practices that have been shared by the more than 15,000 people who've gone through our training. We also have a Wall Street Journal best-selling book on the topic, and I'm going to offer you a free copy of that at the end of this by going to our website. And in fact, we have a lot of free content on our website that you can check out as well. So this installment of the Lumos series is sales methods to improve your smart lighting control projects, close faster, sell smarter. What I'd like to do is focus this afternoon on using proper financial analysis. So we're going to talk first about quantifying the benefits, and then the difference between popular and proper financial metrics. And then we're going to talk about using the right financial analysis template, which is an Excel spreadsheet that's now on its 21st rendition. And I'd be happy to, if you send me an email, I'd be happy to send you a live working copy of that workbook. And then where to get more winning sales insights, namely the bestseller that we have. We can give you a free copy of, and or you could check out Selling Energy, because we do have quite a few distributors, manufacturers, reps, contractors, and other lighting related people take our sales training just to boost their entire business, not just Lumos controls. Okay. So quantifying the benefits, I'm a big fan of telling people that you need to enter the marketplace with business acumen, that you can't just be talking about kilowatt hours and all the other jargon and lighting like chromaticity and CRI and lumens and that sort of efficacy. You need to talk about the things more than just cost per kilowatt hour and how much you're going to save maybe in a rebate. Non-utility cost financial benefits are benefits that can be quantified, meaning counted, and then monetized, meaning turned into dollars. But they appear on a line item of the profit and loss statement that is not utilities. Okay. So for example, there's a story of a aluminum windows and doors manufacturer who installed a lighting retrofit because the CFO was convinced by the operational people, the frontline people, that this is a little dim and maybe even a little dangerous. So they convinced him to fund a 4.2-year simple payment period lighting retrofit. The minute they energized the new lights, they found out that the aluminum scrap rate was falling by 25%, or had fallen by 25%. Because remember, they're taking bars and sheet stock of aluminum and making it into windows and doors. When they valued the avoided scrap rate, it turned out that now they had a 39-day payback instead of a 4.2-year payback, because they added the value of the avoided aluminum scrap rate into the denominator of the simple pay repair calculation. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not a big fan of payback, but it is one of the more popular metrics. And to the extent that you can quantify and monetize non-utility cost financial benefits, that'll get you a better number to share with your decision makers. The third category is non-financial benefits. So there'd be things like improved safety, or things like getting an environmental accolade, like a LEED certification or an EPA Energy Star label. Interestingly enough, some of those non-financial benefits leak benefits back up into the second bucket, and they become non-utility cost financial benefits. I'll give you two examples. If you have increased safety in a warehouse or in a factory, now all of a sudden your workers' compensation premiums will probably go down. Your litigation expenses and accident settlements will go down. Your fines from OSHA will go down. So that's a non-utility cost financial benefit that comes on the heels of a non-financial benefit like increased safety. On the Energy Star label and other environmental accolades front, it is known with at least 6 studies that I'm aware of that if you have an Energy Star labeled U.S. office building, it's more likely to have higher rent per square foot, higher occupancy, and higher sales price. So there are lots of non-financial benefits like environmental accolades that actually translate, or they drive concomitant benefits in the non-utility cost financial benefits category. So let's talk about some of these metrics. And by the way, I want to remind you that everything we talk about today will really help you sell any expense reducing capital project. Let me also step back and say that we've got a lot of experience working with distributors, for example, who need and manufacturers reps who have incredible increases in both their revenue and their margin when they actually learn how to sell energy focused solutions. I'll just give you one example. One of the largest distributors in the world, I can't name their name because we have an NDA with them. They're one of our clients, but they tested us in the Pacific Northwest with 5 people who were part of their lighting projects division. It was actually a sort of a small team inside their larger distributor in the Pacific Northwest. And in the 3 or 4 months that they were taking our selling energy training, they categorized an 88% increase in revenues in projects closed and a 5-point increase in average margin on those projects. They went from 27% to 32% average margin. And that was in 4 months, I think they were taking our training. So on the heels of that, this international distributor expanded our sales training across 16 operating companies in the US. And we just had a cohort go through with 50 some lighting specialists across those companies. And now I've got a call with that same vice president on, I think, the 24th of May to talk about the next cohort they're going to put into our training. So it's really, really important to realize that when you grasp this stuff, which is much more than what we're talking about today, it's more than just financial analysis. It's elevator pitches and one-page proposals and overcoming objections and value propositions that suggest what particular segments will benefit from when they install better lighting. And segment-specific, we call digits to widgets, equating savings to how hard they had to work making the revenue the old-fashioned way, making profit the old-fashioned way. So all that stuff is in there. So if you think you have a ninja team on your staff that can actually sell these projects proactively, it's much more than just controls. Okay. Any expense reducing capital project can benefit greatly from this training. So back to this. So the 3 most popular metrics that I found in my 30 years of coaching people on expense reducing capital projects are these 3: simple payback period, return on investment, and internal rate of return. I can tell you as a Wharton finance graduate and someone who's been using finance in 5 careers over 45 years, 30 years of which have been in the energy space, I can tell you that these 3 metrics are some of the most misleading and underwhelming metrics if you're trying to promote the merits of an expense reduced capital project. What you need to do is you need to migrate the conversation to these metrics: present value, net present value, modified internal rate of return, which corrects for 2 principal disabilities of internal rate of return, and my personal favorite, which is actually so simple that it can be explained to a layperson fairly easily: savings to investment ratio. This is literally how many dollars in today's dollars will you receive for each dollar in today's dollars that you invested. So I often use the analogy, especially for someone who's financially not sophisticated. I say, let's imagine you had a magical ATM machine in the lobby of your building. And every dollar you put in to that machine, it gave you $2.50 back. How many dollars would you put into the ATM machine? Well, most people thinking rationally will say every dollar I have, every dollar comes out, I'm going to shove back into the machine. Heck, I might even sell my grandmother's silver and take the proceeds and shove it into that machine. Okay. Great. Well, the bad news is there is no such mythical ATM machine. The good news is that this project has a savings to invest ratio of 2.5 over the next 10 years, which means that for every dollar you put into this project today, you're going to get back $2.50 in today's dollars as a result of the savings of this project, combination of energy maintenance and other savings. And so you just told me you'd invest everything, including selling your grandma's silver, into that ATM machine that doesn't exist. It'd be kind of difficult to go back on what you just said, being congruent, and tell me all of a sudden you're not interested in investing in this project. So savings invest ratio is one of the best financial metrics that sophisticated financial people use to justify that whatever money they're investing is the highest and best use of shareholder capital. It's also the one that's probably easiest to explain to a layperson. Okay. So I want to digress a little bit and say that when you're trying to decide which projects to fund, and this I'm putting on my hat of advising one of your customers which technologies they should invest in, you basically have 2 principal investment scenarios. The first one is the mutually exclusive scenario, and that is when you're selecting from 2 or more choices when only one will be implemented. So if you have a choice of putting in a lighting control system, you're not going to put in 2, you're going to put in 1, right? And principal investment scenario 2 is what's called non-mutually exclusive. It's sometimes also called independent. So let's say an energy consultant, does a survey of the building, and they find out that they could do a lighting retrofit, a lighting retrofit with controls, a compressed air retrofit, a retrocommissioning exercise. Maybe they could put VFDs in, variable frequency drives, or something else. In that case, you are selecting one or more measures from a list of two or more possible expense reducing opportunities. That's called non-mutually exclusive or independent. Okay. So which metrics do you use? What's the approach to find the highest and best use of capital if you're the owner of that building, let's say? If you go back to the mutually exclusive example, you calculate the life cycle cost of each alternative, not the first cost, the life cycle cost. What does it cost to install labor materials? How long will it last? How many savings will you get per year of it lasting? What's the salvage value when you take it out? I mean, the whole 9 yards. Then you select the alternative with the lowest life cycle cost. It's that simple. There's no reason to get a cheaper control system if it will yield less savings. Okay. It's also there's no reason to choose a higher first cost control system that will produce no more savings. Because in either one of those cases, either you have the cheapest solution that produces less savings or the overly expensive solution that produces the same savings. Both of those non-optimal solutions is going to have a higher life cycle cost than, let's say, a Lumos control system. Okay. In the other side of the coin, where you have non-mutually exclusive list of measures, it's actually a 4-part rulemaking, right? Number one, you want to make sure that each one of the things you're choosing from has been selected based on lowest life cycle cost. So if a lighting and control systems is one of the options, you want to make sure it's the lowest life cycle cost lighting control system. Similarly, if you're comparing that to, let's say, a variable frequency drive system upgrade or a compressed air upgrade or whatever, you'd have to choose the lowest life cycle cost alternatives for those other things. Then you also want to eliminate alternatives with negative net present value. So you don't really want to replace a system if you're going to wind up getting fewer dollars back in present value than you invested to buy the system. Then you calculate what's called the modified internal rate of return or savings investor ratio of each of these alternatives that you're trying to rank. It's basically a beauty contest, right? You're picking the best ones, you're eliminating the ones with the negative NPV. You're then calculating the modified internal rate of return or savings investor ratio of each. By the way, that's easily done with the spreadsheet I'm going to give you a free license to. And then you fund those projects in the order of descending modified internal rate of return or savings investor ratio until you run out of money. It's that simple. Okay. Now, there are two special circumstances. One, if you have a system in danger of failing, you have to replace it first because it does you little good to pick the maneuvers that have the highest savings investor ratio, giving you most bang for your buck. If all of a sudden you spend all your capital and then something that you really needed to replace, you don't have any money to do it because you spent all your capital in these highest return elective programs. The second thing is if two or more selections make sense to do simultaneously, you want to group them before ranking the projects for funding. So for example, if you know that you have a large warehouse operation with high ceilings and you're going to need a genie lift to get up there, and maybe you're going to move some equipment to get access to the luminaires, you obviously you would probably want to bundle the new luminaires with the control system because you're going to have to be in the ceiling for both of them. And it's silly to have two separate labor crews going back on two separate days with two sets of genie lifts. Okay. Now, what about simple payment period, return on investment, and IRR? Did you notice that in neither the mutual exclusive scenario nor the non-mutually exclusive scenario did we ever ask you about simple payment period, ROI, or IRR? Okay. The mutually exclusive only used lowest life cycle cost, and the non-mutually exclusive scenario where you have a whole list of things to pick from and you're trying to order them in the highest and best use of your capital until you run out of capital for that year. They asked you to calculate the life cycle cost of each one, to calculate the MIRR and savings investor ratio of each one, and to rank them in that order. But nobody said anything about figuring out which had the best payback period, the highest ROI, or the highest IRR. And for those of you who think that shunning IRR is sacrilegious because so many customers ask you for IRR, I will tell you that the IRR is the internal rate of return is actually I'm going to put my phone on do not disturb. Sorry. If the IRR internal rate of return has two major disabilities. One of them is that if you have multiple changes in sign on cash flows, you get multiple right answers. But the biggest problem with internal rate of return, for those of you who are doing economic analyses and you're trying to figure out like, okay, this customer wants an IRR of at least 25%. Their hurdle rate sometimes is used for IRR. Their hurdle rate is 20%. They won't do a project that has less than an IRR of 20%. The problem with IRR is that it assumes that if a project says that it has an IRR of 20%, every dime that comes out of that project has to be reinvested somewhere at the 20% IRR from the time that you get the dime to the time that the analysis term is over. And to the extent you can't just walk into a bank and saying, hey, I just got some utility savings from my lighting control system, and I'd like to write a certificate of deposit for the next 9 years for 20% a year, they're going to look at you like you had two heads, and the security guard will, pull you aside and maybe call the cops. So the fact that people cannot reinvest their proceeds at the internal rate of return, in most cases, means that the IRR, the whole house of cards, comes down. So I could go into more detail during the questions period if you're curious, but pay by period has at least 6 or 7 disabilities, not the least of which is it doesn't take into account the time value of money. The second thing is the ROI, which is basically just the inverse of simple pay periods, the reciprocal. And then the third thing, of course, is our IRR, and I already explained the 2 disabilities there. So they may be frequently asked for metrics, but they're really terrible. You need to go to proper metrics: present value, net present value, modified internal rate of return that corrects for those 2 disabilities of internal rate of return, and savings to investor ratio, which, as I already explained with the ATM example, is really easy. It's not only one of the best metrics to talk about, but it's also easy to explain even to a non-financial professional. So should you still calculate the popular metrics? The answer is yes, because if you don't, you'll be deemed to be evasive. People will suspect if you don't list the payback period, they say, must be a really long payback period if they don't list it in their analysis. You just have to make sure that you migrate the conversation away from these so-called popular metrics and toward the proper metrics to support smarter decision making. Okay. Now, another analogy that I sometimes give people, and they reuse it with their customers, is assume you're investing for your retirement. Should you be more interested in how fast you're going to get your original investment back, or how many times you'll get your investment back before you retire? If you're if you're talking about simple payment period, you're just basically obsessed with how fast you're going to get your money back. But if I just turned 65, so if I invested $100,000 and I say I'm going to retire at 75 because I'm a workaholic, and I give that to $100,000 to a financial planner, do I care how soon he's going to make me back my first 100,000, or do I want to know how many times he's going to give me my $100,000 back between now and the time that I retire? Now, that's not a perfect analogy, because when we talk about savings to investor ratio, we're talking about present value, not just arithmetic nominal numbers that he's going to give me back, let's say $100,000 4 times. Because if he gives me back $100,000 4 times, but the first time happens 2 years from now, and the second time happens 5 years from now, and the third time happens 10 years from now, those are not worth the same amount of money if my discount rate is anything greater than 0. But it's a simple, assuming a discount rate is 0 and no time value money problems, this is an analogy that will explain to you that most people thinking clearly are going to want to know how many times they get their money back, not how fast they get their first investment back, and being blind to how many, what happens after that. All right. So what's the best way to migrate the conversation to focus on a more useful financial metric? Here's a perfect example. When the prospect asks you, what's the payback? You can confidently reply, let's say this one happens to be a simple pay period of 3.7 years, which is decidedly unsexy for most investors. It's 3.7 years. And I think what you'll find to be more interesting is that the project has a savings investor ratio of 2.9, which means that over the next 10 years, it should return $2.90 in today's dollars for every dollar you invest. So frankly, I would take a smartphone picture of that slide, because when you have to migrate the conversation from payback to something like savings to investor ratio, this is a really great way to do it. Number one, you use the word and instead of but. That's a very important sales professional's ninja technique. But negates everything that comes before it. And is good to say. It's sort of like the equivalent of however, without saying however. And I think what you'll find to be more interesting is a really great preface when you really want to take someone's focus from an objection and make it into an objective. And that's what we did here. And I think what you'll find to be more interesting is that the project has a savings investor ratio of 2.9, which means that you're going to get back $2.90 for every buck you invest. Sort of a bang for your buck index. Okay. So I'm going to give you a sneak preview of the right financial analysis template. Remember, I went to Wharton for finance, top of my class, and been using finance for 45 years. This financial worksheet has been adopted by big companies like Honeywell and Belimo, big billion-dollar Swedish controls and contactors company in Sweden, and several other large clients of ours. But before I show you that, I will share with you that most decisions are made emotionally and then justified financially. So your job is to give people a reason to do business with you, whether it be a Loomis Controls transaction or something else that you're selling out of your wheelhouse. But in order to make sure that they can justify to the money people that they can afford what they want to do emotionally, it really pays to make sure that your financial analysis is transparent, credible, and compelling. So what do I really mean by that? Well, number one, when I show you this worksheet and you put in your cost of savings, you want to make sure that those costs of savings are put in the right columns from date 0, which is today, to say date 10, which is 10 years from today. Number two, you want to make sure you accurately estimated the utility savings. So you probably should be using an average cost per kilowatt hour if you know that your control system is going to save power in the hours of day that are most expensive. Reasonably estimated maintenance labor savings if you're doing a lighting retrofit that includes controls and you assume that you put LEDs in, so they're not going to have to replace all their T8 or T12 or T10 lamps. The fact that it's longer lasting LEDs, if they have been accustomed to having their Billy the Bulb Boy replace their burned out fluorescent lamps, they're not going to save anything on labor in hard cash because Billy the Bulb Boy is not going to be laid off for 1/8 of his year. Now, if they're using a third-party lighting maintenance company, like many income properties do, they obviously having longer lasting lamps will provide them with less need for the lighting maintenance company. So that's real cash savings they'll have. But just be careful not to overestimate the maintenance labor savings. Credibly estimated non-utility cost financial benefits, and that can come from either authoritative studies or common sense calculations or pilot measurements. Sensible inflation discount finance and reinvestment rates. I'll show you in a moment where those rates are entered into my financial spreadsheet. A lot of people have made a big thing about how much energy prices have gone up since the pandemic. A lot of people have talked about hyperinflation. It's certainly larger than what was in the pandemic when the economy slowed down. But at the end of the day, you're going to get far more rocks thrown at you for overstating inflation than you would get kudos for understating inflation. Let me unpack that for you. If you put in 3% inflation, a CFO may say, well, 3%, I mean, inflation is higher than that. Do you think it should be only 3%? And you can confidently answer, well, that's how we roll. We're conservative. Now, once you say that to the CFO, he or she is going to assume that you're equally conservative in cases of engineering. So you probably didn't overstate burn hours, and you probably didn't overstate watts per square foot. The fact that you're visibly conservative on inflation gives you kudos on probably the other things that they can't as obviously see. If you have a high inflation rate, then you're going to have to do two things. You're going to have to justify, well, first of all, you're going to have to sacrifice credibility because you're going to think that you puff the numbers and all the engineering calculations as well. And number two, you're going to have to justify that even though there's hyperinflation now, you're going to have to justify that hyperinflation is going to continue for all the years of the analysis term, which is kind of a tough position to argue. Okay. The accurately calculated financial metrics, I'll take care of that with my worksheet. Thoughtful sensitivity analysis involving key variables. CFOs and other financial decision makers are used to making decisions in the presence of imperfect information, but they're not used to making decisions in the presence of no information. And they'll feel a lot more confident in their decisions to approve a project or projects if you give them a sensitivity analysis that models, well, what happens if your costs are a little higher than you projected here? Or what happens if your savings are a little less? So the nice thing about having the worksheet that I'm going to share with you, and assuming that you choose to use it, is that you can change those variables and see that you still come up with a positive net present value and a positive savings invest ratio, or I should say savings invest ratio more than 1.0, and a very healthy modified internal rate of return, even if you were wrong on the savings by a certain percentage. And playing with the numbers before you get into the meeting will give you the confidence to defend those numbers in front of the CFO. And the final thing is helpful comparisons regarding paying for the project all cash, phasing the project in over time if they don't think they have the cash, or financing. Okay. So you got to realize that the person approving the funding may not be as emotionally motivated as your internal champion at the outset. Like your champion may want a control system in there because they hate to see the lights on at night when they leave. They may want a kind of control system in there to control for daylight dimming. They may want to honor the CEO who just made some promises about reducing the carbon footprint of the company. So they may be emotionally motivated to embrace a control system because they think it's smarter than the average bear. Instead of just throwing LED lights in the ceiling, they want to control those lights with Lumos equipment. Realize that when it goes to capital budgeting and you have to justify the higher incremental cost of putting in controls, you had better be prepared to defend yourself and prove that that's the highest and best use of capital. Okay. So it's your job to ensure that the approvers, CFO or CTO or COO, whoever's going to say yes to this budget request, sees a link between your project and one or more outcomes that they truly value. And a perfect example of that would be like, okay, sure, putting controls in does increase the front end cost of the project. And putting controls in may actually even reduce the net present value a little bit because, it's higher first cost and whatever. It may not be enough incremental savings to offset the fact that it's a higher first cost, but it's going to save you more carbon because it's going to keep the lights off more often. And if the COO or CTO or energy solutions manager, energy sustainability manager has made promises to Wall Street that they're going to reduce their carbon footprint, that may be the link you're looking for. And I'll give you an example. I was just on the phone earlier today with a company. It's a compressor company in the Southeast, and they were proposing a compressor upgrade for a large pulp and paper plant. Can't tell you which one because we have an NDA. But bottom line is they said, okay, the what's your payback period threshold? And the pulp and paper plant said, we cannot do any capital projects that have longer than a 2-year simple pay period. My graduate of my selling energy training was smart enough to ask the question, do you happen to have a special budget to support carbon reductions? And that was the magic question. Because it was a matter of fact, we do have a budget that was set aside when the CEO started promising Wall Street we're going to decrease our carbon footprint. So that has a little bit more relaxed capital budgeting requirements. There, you only have to have a 4-year payback. Why? Because they're trying to meet these carbon targets, then they have an extra $1 million sequestered just to pay for carbon reduction projects. Okay, so this can help you not only selling Lumos controls, but also other projects, lighting retrofits, garden variety lighting retrofits, where they may say, well, we have to have a 1 or 2 year payback, but then they say, oh, but we do have this other pile of money for reducing carbon footprint. In fact, the rumor has it that Intel authorized 42 million square feet of lighting retrofits a couple of years ago, simply because their CEO had made a promise on an earnings call to Wall Street that they were going to reduce their carbon footprint by X by Y year. Okay. And bottom line, you want to keep it to a single page. That brings us to the financial savings. When you take a look at lighting controls in general, you'll see that it can reduce costs by up to 65%. The energy savings are between 5 cents and 20 cents per square foot. In open offices, these are some of the statistics that come from the studies, 20 to 29%, private offices, 13 to 50%, conference rooms, 21 to 65%. And when you calculate the savings, it's not that difficult. First, you calculate potential cost savings per room by doing the cost of, or start with the area of the room in square feet. You multiply by 3,000 hours of operation. You multiply, or whatever the hours of operation normally are. You multiply that by an estimated percentage of time unoccupied. You multiply that by 1.5 watts per square foot, which is what you're going to find in a lot of these buildings. Then you multiply by 0.001 to convert watt hours to kilowatt hours. And then you multiply that by whatever your local average cost per kilowatt hour is. Nationally, it's 10.74 cents per kilowatt hour. So that'll give you a dollar figure of what your savings are for that particular room. And then, of course, if you have 100 rooms in a building, or you can start with the area of the room, start with the area of the building in square feet, or I should say the area of installed controlled space in square feet. But that's how you get the numbers. Okay, so this is the illustrious 1-page financial analysis. If this is a camera shot of it, screenshot of it. If it were the real spreadsheet, I'd be able to scroll down and you'd see that it's actually 8 pages long and has all sorts of sexy bar graphs and stuff. And also if you scroll to the right, it actually goes out 20 years. But when I set the print area for this being just a 10-year view of just the cells that are important for decision makers to see and decide upon. Okay. So on the upper left-hand corner, you have the rates that determine the financial analysis. What's the discount rate, which is used for present value? What's the finance rate? What's the reinvestment rate? Those two rates are used to calculate modified internal rate of return only. The utility and non-utility inflation rates are in there. I put them conservatively at 3%. Over here, you put your anticipated energy and maintenance savings on an annual basis. Down here, you put how you're going to invest in it. Either it's a single investment, or it's a phased-in investment, or it's a finance investment. Up here is if you were to finance the investment, you put the present value as the post-rebate cost of the project. You put your interest rate in, number of years. It's automatically defaulted for 12 payments per year. You take the present value, rather the future value, which in most cases is going to be zero because you want to pay off the loan, and that will automatically populate the finance investment below. Mid-year convention is whether you want the discounting to be done each year at the end of the year or at the middle of the year. Most projects that involve either monthly payments to finance them or monthly savings in the wake of the retrofit, you set that to Y, because that mid-year convention allows the discounting to closely approximate monthly discounting. And if anybody's interested in that, we can have a long conversation about that later. Then in the lower left-hand corner of the spreadsheet, which I've now zoomed in on, you have 3 different kinds of simple pay period, 3 different kinds of return on investment. And then, of course, you have the ones in shading blue. Those are the ones that you need to migrate the conversation to. So in this particular case, it has a 3.3-year simple payback period, which is decidedly unsexy, but it also has a $53,000 and some change net present value and a savings invest ratio that will give you $2.10 back in today's value for every dollar you invest in today's value. So it's a pretty nice investment. Over a 20-year period, the net present value is a little bit more than double, and the savings invest ratio goes up to 3.1, which is $3.10 back for each dollar invested. Okay, so where do you get more winning sales insights to get more projects approved? And again, this is not just for Lumos; it's for everything you sell. Here's one place. You can go to a book that I wrote, 230-page book, became a Wall Street Journal, Barnes & Noble, and Amazon bestseller when it was published, and also won the Actionable Best Business Award and the American Business Awards book award. But bottom line is, it's 83 different ideas for how to sell more projects, and it's free. I mean, you buy $20, I guess, on Amazon, but you get it for free on our website, hardcover, audiobook, or ebook. Just go to sellingenergy.com, request a free copy, and we'll take care of you. Okay. You can also reach out to me at this, Mark, M-A-R-K, at sellingenergy.com, or even just send me a text or voicemail or call me on my cell phone at 415-810-3711. So now's the time for questions, but I'm going to leave this contact information up there because I'm hoping that some people got interested in this and want to know how they can make more sales. And Selling Energy is a great resource for that. We also have an archive of lots and lots of blogs, daily blogs we've written in the past, so you can get a bunch of our content free that way as well. Okay. Michael, I targeted this to end 15 minutes before the end, and I think we're precision parachute jumping. We have 14 minutes more for questions. I'm going to hand the mic back to you.
Great job. Yeah, you did a great job. I see the target in sight, and your parachute is right on target. So
right, hit the little red X on the green field. There you go.
Yeah, well, there are a few cows in the way, but we'll make room. Don't worry about it.
Right.
Yeah. So hey, thank you very much, Mark. As always, it was very informative. And for me, I can only tell you, for me and our team, we just love the ideas that come from Mark and utilizing these advanced financial metrics. Now, there are a whole bunch of other things that, including, but not limited to, looking up segment-specific data for for what he called the digits to widgets segment. That's where you compare what they sell to the energy savings and what it would take to make the same amount of money in the old-fashioned way, as Mark put it. And I wholeheartedly recommend utilizing those kinds of metrics when you're talking to a CFO or the owner. Because it resonates with them. They know it took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to sell $2 million worth of products. And when you can look them directly in the eye and tell them, now look, you can either sell $2 million worth of products or do this energy retrofit, same result. When you can say that, that turns the shaking of the head no into what? Okay, I'll sign. I have seen it. I know it works. So it's great. A couple of the questions that I had early on, and we kind of pinned in was on your spreadsheet, Mark.
Yes.
Do you want me to share my copy of it? I have it open.
Yeah,
if you
well,
want
before
me
you do that, I want to show you this one slide that I thought would be interesting.
Oh,
This is the
sure.
Selling at Six training, and
Mhm.
this is actually an ad that was done by Duke Energy using that digital to widgets philosophy when they tried to sell LED lighting to grocers, and they put a full page ad in Progressive Grocer magazine saying, sell 15,000 bushels of peaches or switch to LED lighting, same results, your choice. Basically what they did was they put the lighting savings that an average sized grocer would expect to see from migrating to LEDs, and then they divided that by the profit margin that year of a grocer. And it turns out that they'd have to sell 15,000 bushels of peaches to get the same savings that they'd see at the bottom line if they upgraded to LED lighting. This ad is significant for three reasons. Number one, it's the epitome of what Michael just explains. We call it digits to widgets, taking savings and dividing by profit margin to get equivalent revenue required in the previous period. The second thing is it doubled the flow of lighting projects from grocers within 4 months to Duke Energy. And then the third one is it won best print ad in the United States. This was done in the utility space. This was done by one of our graduates. So this is the Selling at Six lessons, but I happen to have a picture of the Peaches ad. But Michael, you were going to share something. I just wanted to show that. Couldn't resist
Oh
showing
yeah,
you.
no, I
Yeah.
I actually was referencing that when the way I had framed the results was based on the Peaches
Oh,
advertising.
there you go.
So
There you
yeah,
go. Good.
as a graduate of the Jewell Academy. So
There you go. Right. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to share my screen really quickly. So as Mark mentioned, here is this particular resource comes from his website. It is just an exercise book. You can use it for real world changes. I do things like use 179D here in place of the rebate because the rebates are pretty much a disappearing. They're performing a Houdini. They're disappearing as fast as we can spot them. There's energy and maintenance here. One of the interesting metrics that I played with just to see how it worked, and I don't necessarily understand it. It has something to do with if a company wants to invest their own money on cash on something, what is the rate of return for them? I think that's what the discount rate is. If you play with this number, Mark, why is that important?
Yeah, the discount rate is the rate is basically it's the number that is used to translate nominal cash flows into present value, and it basically reflects the investor's cost of capital over time, which reflects their inflation assumptions and things like that. If you have a business ad absurdum that financed itself with credit cards, that business's discount rate is pretty high because the cost of capital is really high. Sophisticated companies like publicly traded companies that have sophisticated capital structures, they sometimes use what's called RWAC in finance, R weighted average cost of capital, WACC. And what it is you take the amount of what they pay their shareholders in a dividend, what they pay their bondholders in a coupon, and also what interest rate they pay their banker for short-term borrowings. And depending on what percentage of their capital structures, each one of their sources of money, they do a weighted average. That's what their cost of capital is. That's what that discount rate is.
Right.
Yeah, and the higher the discount rate, the lower the present value, because had you had the money earlier, you could have reinvested it at a higher rate. So ad absurdum, the highest net present value is going to be a discount rate of 0. Where dollars you get in 10 years are the same as dollars you get today. But most companies don't use a discount rate of 0. I've used a discount rate of 10, but you'll have like publicly traded companies that have good access to capital. They might use discount rates of 7. The federal government, which basically sells a bunch of bonds to the Chinese and other governments, their discount rate on federal projects, OMB and mil spec projects, they're like 1% or 2%, whatever the interest rate is they're paying on government bonds. That's what their discount rate is. So they're ridiculously low. But for private sector companies, I think if you put a discount rate in of 10, no one's going to throw rocks at you.
Yeah, and as you can see, if you play with the sheet, you put it in 20%, and it changes the discount and payback period. So that's the third metric here.
Also changes the net present value. It changes the savings investor ratio. It changes a lot of things. Anything that relates to savings investor ratio or NPV, net present value.
Let me get to that. Yeah. So that's
So right now, if the discount rate is 10%, the NPV is going to be higher than if the discount rate. I'm sorry, the NPV is going to be higher than if the discount rate were 20%. because
Mm-hmm.
basically the savings are going to be worth more to you the lower the discount rate is.
Mm-hmm. And
The
then
finance, the finance and reinvestment rates, by the way,
Mhm.
those are necessary to calculate MIRR. But if you don't care about MIRR, you could put 1,000% in for finance and reinvestment rate. The only thing that finance investment rate affects is the modified internal rate of return. There's just two inputs into the MIRR formula in Excel. And of course, inflation, the utility, non-utility cost inflation rates, those affect everything on the sheet practically, because your energy savings, your maintenance savings are going to be affected by your inflation rates that you put up there. And that's why I keep them conservative at 3%.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And net present value is
Yep.
just the value of your money today as compared to in 10 years, right?
Well, the net
In this
present value
case.
it's basically the present value of what you invested over time. In most cases, most people, like in your case, you have a $65,000 one-time investment. That is at date zero, which is finance speak for today. So by definition, that already is present value. But as you can see here on row, let's see here, what is it? Row, Seth, was it 35, 36? The annual cash flow is like 15,450, 15,450. The annual cash flow goes up. That's it. That goes up every year by inflation. But then when you look at the annual present value, right now you have the discount rate at 0, I bet. But if you
Right.
change the discount rate to say 10%, you'll see that annual present value goes down, even though the nominal cash flows are going up, because the farther away from date zero you get, the less that money's really worth to you in today's dollars.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can see that right here. Net
Yep.
present value on a $65,000 deal went down to $43,000 just by having, by making this
More
10.
than exactly,
Yeah.
more than exactly.
From
Yeah.
zero.
Right.
So from
Right.
zero, it's worth a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
Due to inflation, right? 10 years worth of inflation.
Yes. Yeah.
But if you have a discount rate of say 10, then of course, yeah, we've lost money, and that's about right when you consider inflation. So
Yeah. And 10%, the funny thing about it is you got to make sure that the inflation rate and the discount rate stay sort of comfortably far apart from each other, because you can't say that inflation is going to be 20 or 10% a year and then your discount rate is going to be 0, because you're saying that inflation is going to be diluting the value of your money by 10% a year, but you're not giving the investor any credit for having his money waste away at 10% a year. So the discount rate always has to be greater than the inflation rate. And I think that a 7-point corridor, because the discount rate is also taking into account investment risk, technology risk, management risk, all other kinds of risk, even the risks of the savings happening,
right.
So I don't know what you just did there, but everything went bonkers.
Oh yeah, I did that on purpose.
Okay, maybe do
Temporarily. I was just going to switch. I was going to switch to financing just to show folks how to fill this out.
Oh yeah.
Because really Mark did a really great job of showing where you would actually interact with the where you don't and where you do. So everything yellow you can. If it's not yellow, you probably leave it alone. Now I created this section. I made it yellow because it stands out, but that was just so you could eyeball quickly what it does to things like some of the metrics that we're not going to use, but I wanted to highlight as we move some of these metrics around where you could see them. So, all right. Well, I think that, by the way, you can tell right off the top, if we have a $65,000 finance project that has the energy and maintenance savings, we can be pretty much cash flow positive, wouldn't you say, Mark?
Well, you can see, well, the answer is really, we don't need to guess. We can take a look at what line 35. And so your annual cash flow is $30,000. Let's see, for some reason, your let me see, your finance
because I
investment.
did minus, says it's just do 65,000.
Yeah, you should do 65,000 up there. The present value 65,000. Yeah, so now exactly. So you do have positive cash flow as of year 2. It's minor positive cash flow as of year 2. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
And you can see that on rows 35 and 36. 35 is the nominal values and 36 is the discounted present values. And you have a nice positive net present value of $39,000, even though you're financing at 12%, which is actually a pretty high rate.
Yeah. And then if you took into account, if there's are no rebates available, but it's a rather large project or a large facility or in manufacturing or some other area, you could take a 179D IRA. It's not your individual retirement account. That is the
Yeah.
Inflation Reduction Act, and we'll talk about that
Yes.
in at the end of May. And we have, just as a matter of course, taken a 21% tax rate and applied that to the $4 a square foot, and to come out with a semi or quasi cash value, and applied that in the rebate amount. Now we'll want to talk with your accountant, their accountant, Randy Lucas, next week or on May 30th, to validate or verify that that is a good practice. But on the surface, it looks like a good practice. So is there any questions from the audience? I think we've taken a lot of time, and I really appreciate everybody's patience, and I hope you guys got as much from it as we do. And I have 12 people left out of 17. That's pretty good. Only 5 had to drop off. So
there you go. Good. Michael, thanks for hosting me today. And again, folks, I'll just reiterate the offer. If you need help in selling projects, all projects, just feel free to check out sellingedge.com, get a free copy of our book, reach out to me with questions. Happy to help you in any way I can. Okay.
Yeah. And if you guys all know me, in the chat box, I'm going to put my cell phone number. You can reach out to me anytime, as well as VP Lumos Control. Sometimes, you spell things enough times, you can actually type it quickly, so without error.
There you go.
And there you are. There's my information, folks. Don't hesitate. Give me a call. I'm always available. If you call me, if you're on the East Coast and you call me at your 9 o'clock, I will call you back. I'm probably not going to answer the phone at 6 o'clock. I haven't yet had my coffee. My wife got me a cup that says 6 cup minimum prior to speaking. So
that's funny.
Yeah. So thank you very much, you guys. Appreciate it. Anything else, Mark, before we any last minute jewels that you want to hand out?
Well, I'll tell you that, my feeling is that something my father told me over dinner at age 11, I've been trying to use it for the last 54 years. And that is the best way to prosper yourself is to prosper others. With selling energy, we don't teach you how to sell cigarettes to toddlers. We're teaching you how to sell projects that customers would not normally be aware of, and yet they would create great value for the occupants and the economy and the environment and your own bottom line. So it's a win-win-win-win proposition. You just have to learn how to be a better doctor to prescribe better solutions for your prospects. Absolutely. And I would definitely recommend, for those of you who don't yet have a lighting specialized practice, to go out there and proactively look for energy saving maneuvers in lighting. You're missing the boat, because you've got a lot of customers. You can cross-sell and upserve them and give them a lot of value. Why wait for somebody else to sell them projects? And why just answer the phone and fill out requests for pricing? You should be proactively looking at customers who've already created value for, and sell them something else. Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mark.
My pleasure. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. Bye-bye now.
Thanks, everyone.